Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes or by plugging our RSS feed into your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at vmspod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on Spotify, YouTube, and tunein.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And visit patreon.com/vmspod or paypal.me/vmspod to make a one-time or recurring donation and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. As you may or may not know, I have an obsessive need to categorize things and create rules-based systems. These tend to get wrecked when they run up against reality, and I really have done a great job over the years in terms of going with the flow and getting over that stuff, or at least, hiding my dismay when day-to-day life thrashes everything I carefully construct. Which is my way of talking about why today's podcast counts as a regular episode of the Virtual Memories Show and not a COVID check-in, even though we talk a lot about the pandemic and its effect on the guest's life and work. See, in my tortured mental framework, the COVID check-in episodes applies to the shorter ones I record with past guests to see how they're holding up during the pandemic. When I record with someone new or with a past guest about a new book or other project, that'll get categorized as a regular episode of the show and accordingly have a number attached to it like the old shows I did before we all got locked in. I know this distinction is going to mean absolutely nothing to you guys, but another aspect of my obsessive-compulsive behavior is that I really need to utter what these weird rules are so that they somehow apply, even as I'm sure they're going to get violated or otherwise superseded like 5 minutes later. Anyway, none of this is to imply that the pandemic, self-isolation, etc. has sent me down a spiral of obsessive behavior. Despite the fact that I've been putting out daily episodes for quite a while now, I've actually felt better and looser in the last few weeks. I guess as a result of having this construct around me and not really having another environment besides home. I see a lot of my patterns and behaviors because that's all that's here, frankly. Plus the demands of the day job, along with doing 6 episodes a week, it just leaves me with less room to be fussy. I mean, I have to build a routine and a rhythm and all that stuff, but at the same time, I'm learning to let things go a little more because there's so much we can't control. So let's get to the show. My guest for this full-length episode of the Virtual Memories Show is cartoonist and educator Tom Hart. Now, I first read Tom's work in the early 90s. I was in grad school. I remember the comic store in College Park, Maryland, where I picked up Hutch Owen's Working Hard, a mini comic about a vagrant/rebel pissed off at corporatization. I loved Tom's storytelling. I loved the Weeble-like characters he drew, and I followed his work over the decades. The book he's best known for is his saddest one. So if you look him up and you find Rosalie Lightning, keep in mind it is a memoir about the death of his infant daughter. Don't start there with Tom's work. It is a fantastic book, Rosalie Lightning, but I feel like you should get to know his work through other avenues. Like maybe don't dive right into the deep end. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff, and I'll have links to Tom's work in the episode. In addition to making comics, though, Tom also created and co-runs the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW, down in Gainesville, Florida, which is a program for comics creators in all the varied forms of comics. SAW features a ton of great courses with instructors like past guest Emily Flake. I'll have links to the workshop saw and Tom's work in the show notes for this one. It's fascinating to me to see guys who were contemporaries of mine, basically, who, built up over the years, both a body of work and now these institutions where they're helping the next generation and younger generations find their voice in comics. So it's interesting talking to Tom as well as James Sturm, who I did a check-in episode with a few weeks ago. Tom's also currently working on a comic called B is Dying that looks like it'll become his next book. Now, Tom and I met a few times at cons and festivals over the years, and we'd always have these great conversations, like right in the middle of everything that was going on. And we talked about getting together to record sometime during, downtime for both of us. Of course, now we have nothing but downtime, but no way to get together besides a call-in. So here we are. Now, as caveats go, not a ton, just the exigencies of the guest not having the same audio setup that I do. Now, here's Tom's bio. Tom Hart is a #1 New York Times best-selling author and critically acclaimed Eisner-nominated cartoonist and the executive director of the Sequential Artists Workshop in Gainesville, Florida. He is the creator of Daddy Lightning and the Hutch Owen series of graphic novels and books. The collected Hutch Owen was nominated for Best Graphic Novel in 2000. He won a Xeric Grant for self-publishing cartoonists. He teaches sequential art at the University of Florida and taught at NYC's School of Visual Arts for 10 years. His most recent book is The Art of the Graphic Memoir, Tell Your Story, Change Your Life. He is married to the cartoonist Leela Corman. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Tom Hart. So,
well, how are you?
I guess,
right. I mean,
I'm Northern New Jersey. Well, I mean, I was talking to one of my pharma people today, and we started off with the obligatory, "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" "Oh, I'm good too." And then we both paused, and I said, "Well, obviously, by good, I mean, we're pretending this entire thing isn't happening, but that's what we all have to do."
It was nice to see your email this morning, and the view from the top of the mountains was really nice, or the hills.
Yeah, that's we always call them mountains here, but really, we understand it's New Jersey, so all we have are hills, really. But
But it reminded me of something I want to do with my students tomorrow, literally tomorrow, which is have them help me find some landscape imagery I'm looking for. The truth is I just want some natural stimulation from outside of either my own brain or my own immediate surroundings. So one thing I'm going to have them do, we've been doing 3 times weekly calls or Zoom calls, and I'm just going to be like, okay, I want everybody to find me some nature pictures. Literally, like, I've got more parameters, but whatever. But I'm these notions of how to stay connected and how to also keep some of our emotions firing in certain ways. New things just keep cropping up. I don't know if that's like that for you.
Yeah, it's part of the, where I am, things are quiet. We're 25 miles from New York City, but, it's the woods out here. So if anything, there's a degree that you can just get kind of lost in yourself. It's part of why I run every other day, just trying to not have the ongoing thoughts or trying to find ways of changing my routes. It's sort of like those oblique strategies that Brian Eno and the other guy have.
Of course. Peter Schmidt.
So, just trying to come up with those ways of getting out of your mental ruts.
New neural pathways. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good term for it too.
Yeah.
I mean, it was literal. Like last Saturday, I went on a long run and deliberately went backwards on a bunch of my regular routes. I took the opposite direction than I normally take and did other stuff. It's a little like the first time I saw Ben Catcher speak back in the 90s at a lecture. He talked about coming up to an intersection from a different direction than you're used to and becoming a tourist in your own city or your own town.
Yeah.
And weirdly, that stuck with me for 25 years. He sounded like an old man then, and really changed in all this time. But you were talking about working with the students by Zoom. How has SAW adjusted? Like, how's the shift to virtual teaching and that sort of relationship been for you?
Well, it's funny. We have three different main things we do here, right? We have the year-long students who they're here. Well, they're here the year, and they're using this space, and we're teaching them in this space, and they're checking books out of this space and drawing in this space. And so that ground to an immediate weird halt. But we have a pretty robust online community, and that's hasn't changed, and in fact, it's grown predictably. And then we do these sort of like week-long programs. And actually, I just realized we're in the middle of what would have been a week-long program right now, but obviously that got canceled. Yeah. So me personally, I'm actually kind of like, I'm glad for a little downtime and not having to manage, for instance, the week-long that we would be managing right now and stuff. But for the year-long students, yeah, it's been I think the same thing for a lot of people, where just suddenly you're, okay, we're going to do everything online, which was an logistically easy thing to do, but just emotionally it was difficult. Most of our first meetings were just like, how's everybody doing? I'm doing all right, you know. I took my dog for a walk yesterday. So like at least 30 or 40 minutes, if not an hour, of just like talking about what we're not doing, what we are doing. And then we got into a routine pretty quickly of just turning them into drawing sessions where we all would share images of a different variety, and just got into real meditative drawing for a good month. And that's been great. Still the first 10 or 15 minutes is still everyone just sort of moaning around. You remember Hee Haw probably. I don't know why I would think you would remember Hee Haw. Why would I think that?
I do.
Oh, okay. What was there was guys in the cornfield moaning and, do you remember? I'll have to pull that up. But ever since May sort of clicked over, I've been trying to say, okay, let's try and move some projects forward, or see how we can build on all this sort of, we've been present together online for so long, for this month or whatever, and like, how can we? And there's a little bit of resistance. Some of the students are like, I have no idea what to do. Others are like, I've been wanting to sort of move some things forward too. So we're sort of going to set up a new schedule where maybe half of that time we're like checking in and doing a little bit critiquing, a little bit of, even just affirmations, like, yeah, this looks like a good project, or requests for help. Hey, I'm really stuck on this part, stuff like that. So we're going to be doing a little bit of that going forward until around June. Near as I can tell, like, I haven't officially, like, the year-long classes officially would have been over by now, but that seems ridiculous. And so as near as I can tell, these Zoom sessions with this year's class are ongoing and maybe, forever. But anyway, I'm going to change it again in June, because online we're doing this pretty robust graphic novel. It's got a really long name, graphic novel development program, where we're just going to spend June through November. I guess that's 6 months, working on people's graphic novels, mine included, because I've been in this weird rut for a long time. And going to try and rope some of the year-long students into that. So we're going to work May. May will be the time for them to sort of get prepared for that June project. And of the like 8 students, we have maybe 2 or 3 of them will be ready for that. And that'll be a way, hopefully, to be more like, okay, let's just like fight our way through this, make something, and use this time.
Are you at all afraid of being more unprepared to work on your graphic novel than your students are? I ask kiddingly, but I know that's got to be something that preys on you with the juggling everything else and having to make creative work. But,
no, it's true. My main problem has been time, and my main logistic problem has been time. The emotional problems I could probably sort out with. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But no, I'm ready to dive in, and I'm actually managing this time pretty well, I think, and I'm managing to have more structure in my life and my daily sort of habits than usual. I think because I don't have so many things tugging at me. So yeah, I think I'm ready to sort of dig in. But I'm working with material that I've been just collecting material for years and just sort of circling around it, and I think I'm just ready to start committing.
Is it a project you want to refer to, talk about in the slightest, or is that a complete jinx as far as your creative
No,
process
it'll look familiar to people who, picked up my small mini comic at Mocha or whatever, or have been following my weird second obscure Instagram. But it's this Bee is Dying. That is the name of the strip. And it's this guy who's propelled himself. There's a backstory, but you don't need to hear it. Back in time, 70 to 100,000 years. So he's this modern guy in this back time. And it's such a rich scenario for me personally, because every idea that I sort of come across whether it's in my brain or in my daily sort of sifting through the culture of the world, it just has an instant place in this scenario. So I've been just collecting ideas and sort of and slowly kind of developing a bit of a through line and stuff like that. But I never seem to have the precise right amount of commitment to go forward with it, which is exactly what beginning graphic novelists often experience too. They know what the story is, they know what the characters are, they just can't make it happen. For me, it's a little different because I've done that before, and what I'm looking for is a sort of a new form too. Like, one reason I'm not working productively is like everything feels like the old form, and I don't want to. And I'm sort of, for whatever reason, I'm looking for the new form. I'm giving myself that luxury actually to some degree, because I have, I run the school. Nobody's going to buy my comic. I'm not going to try and sell my, I don't owe this to anybody except my own creative satisfaction. So so at the same time, I'm sifting through all these ideas and all these images. I'm also sort of like trying to figure out what that new form is. But the answer is always it just needs way more silence and way more work than you think to find it. And so that I haven't been able to find. I haven't been able to find that silence. I haven't been able to find that work time. But I know it's not far away.
On the flip side, if you would, what I guess I wonder is, did having the school, having the responsibilities, etc., help you in that initial phase when the world went sideways because you couldn't afford to fall into yourself and become too ruminative and contemplative? You actually had, this outside set of responsibilities besides family to deal with. Whereas, the time one could spend thinking about a graphic novel and how best to create a new form is exactly, to me, the state of mind that leads to utter paralysis, anxiety, and horrible self-absorbed depression. But that's just me.
Right. No, it's true. I'm not. Yeah. I haven't gone those routes, and it's possible that, I guess you're saying obviously the self-involved depression a lot of people experience. The self-involved seems like the wrong word. I'm sorry for that, but no, yeah, because I've been so busy trying to maintain this ship, keep it afloat or whatever. And I've always enjoyed those projects. Running the school is a thankless and very gratifying task. And so keeping it going has been, it's been pretty, it's kept my mind off things, obviously, as does being a parent of a kid who's home all the time. But I am trying to hopefully turn that energy towards that graphic novel, that in that ruminative space that you're talking about, and not, I don't know, not get depressed. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I think the depression in particular, to me, it looked like that initial month or so where you talked about that with some of your students.
Yeah.
That's the phase when things could get really bad. Now that we've sort of adjusted to what this reality is, being able to step back, it sounds like it would be healthier now than if you tried doing this in March, is right. What I'm saying.
Yeah.
The entire world's gone asunder, and it's time for me to create my great graphic novel. Those two things are not really, really reconcilable to me.
Yeah. But we've all taken a big breath or two, and now maybe we can slowly inch towards that and with a healthier mindset and some healthier habits. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a work routine set up? As far as, you mentioned the scheduled Zoom meetings and all that, but as far as creative time on top of homeschooling and everything else you have to do,
are you
able to partition, or is it catch as catch can?
No, I caught on early on that Leela and I needed some structure around it, so we're dividing the day up into 3.5 hour chunks, and tending to Molly Rose during the other one. So yeah, I've got some time every afternoon. Most of the time, I've become one of those people who's mostly answering emails all the time. So most of the time I'm answering emails, but I'm trying to clear those decks, and I think it's working. I think I'm getting there. Other projects like marketing the school is a big project, but I can front load that a lot. So if I can do a lot in one long series of sessions, then I can sort of buy myself some time later. The problem is really dedicating yourself to actually being creative in that time that you've said, this is my creative time, which is one reason I'm doing this online program, is to have myself be accountable to the people I'm saying I'll help them be accountable to.
Awesome. Yeah. And how is it assessing people's work online as opposed to, again, just being there in person? I just don't know what the process is like for comics pages as opposed to, canvases or drawing, larger scale or something.
Yeah. I mean, logistically, it means we're sharing PDFs and people give you Drive links, which I despise. I don't know why I hate Google Drive so much, but when people send me a link, I'm like, don't give me Google Drive link. Anyway. But
I'm a Dropbox guy, so yeah.
Yeah, me too. And so, I don't love reading comics on the screen. So sometimes I may have to print those out, but hopefully what people will want to be sharing will be smaller chunks, and we'll be able to navigate some of those issues more easily. I think the limitations kind of are equal in a way. Like what we can put up on the wall to share is like, maximum of like, I don't know, 20 pages or something for any one student. And that seems like the maximum PDF I'd want to have shared with me as well, that I can actually like sort of, digest and sort of comment on or something. So, we've been doing this online stuff for 3 or more years now, and it really robustly the last 2. So we've gotten some okay habits about, where you store your folders, when you put that time into actually reading all those, like that backlog of PDFs or whatever, when you feel like just printing them out and wasting the paper, which sometimes has to happen, just to take your eyes off the screen.
You're destroying the environment.
I know, but we print on the backs of things, and
I'm hip. I've during these whole things, I've been taking notes on screen. Now, my whole thing was always writing in these little notepads that I was incredibly specific about the size, grid length, etc. But now I've reconciled to, I may as well just type these in very quietly while we're talking. That's how this is going to work better. So,
there's just related to wasting the environment. There's a moment in a Glenn Dakin comic. Do you know Glenn Dakin's comics?
I remember, oh God, Tom gave me a collection of his stuff that I'm blanking on. But the nice thing about doing these things remotely is that I can just type things in and look them up online. So
well, that would have been called Wrong for the Right Reasons.
Yeah, that was it. God, that was wonderful.
Yeah. And there's a moment in one of those stories. I think the story is called Abe Becomes Suddenly Rich. And it's just this fantasy where he just people keep just heaping money on him. But by the end, he burns it all. And it's like his neighbor or his friend comes on and is like, Abe, you're burning it all. And I think the line he says, sometimes to be free, a man has to do something selfishly daft. I'm going to go find it because it's like wildly selfishly daft or something. And it's like, when I do something like waste paper from the printer, that's the moment I think of. It's like, okay, you have to be a little selfishly daft.
This is my maverick moment.
To be free.
Now, have you followed or been following Roger Langridge's daily diary comics?
No. God, I haven't.
Oh, gosh. Look up Hotel Fred on Instagram.
Okay.
He had been doing them through Patreon and then decided he still does them through Patreon, but gives them away now. 4 panels every day. And he admits it's starting to, at one point, it was starting to cut into the actual productivity time, but he also found it useful to have this as a regular thing. Says the guy who's putting up a daily podcast of 30 to 45 minutes every day. So,
he's very inventive. I haven't looked deeply into Roger's work in a long time, but he was always playing with the form, and I really loved that stuff.
Oh yeah. He's one of my all-time faves. He's actually the precursor to my doing the show. Years and years ago at TCAF, was it TCAF? Yeah, for TCAF, Tom Spurgeon was supposed to interview him, and family emergency. Tom wasn't able to go to TCAF. So 2 days before, he zaps me with, do you mind interviewing Roger? Because I know you love his work. And I'd never done something like that before.
No kidding.
Literally read like this giant stack of, it's like 2007, 2008, read this giant stack of Roger stuff, wrote all these questions. And then we sat down, had this wonderful flowing conversation because Roger is Roger. And then I look back years later, I'm like, oh, that was the moment I realized I could do something like this.
Wow.
And yeah, everything flows back to Tom, whether it's family emergencies or, all the great connection and everything else. But I lament about that every single day. Anyway,
I was really great.
Sorry, go on.
Obviously, I'm deeply sad to see Tom go, but I was really, I'm a bit of an introvert or something, and I was really gladdened when all the outpourings about Tom came out, and they all matched my view of Tom. I was like, oh
good.
That's not, because a lot of times sometimes I think I'm the only person who likes a certain person. There are people I know that's true of, like, oh, how can you stand that person? And I'm just like, I don't know, it's all right. But all of my
well loved.
Everything is so sad. All right.
Yeah, it was going to the big memorial we had last December in Columbus and seeing people from all different phases of his life and not just comics people was illuminating for me, just realizing how broad, knowing intellectually I knew he had a bigger life than our direct connection, but seeing it there and seeing how similar, despite the different areas of interest, similar everybody's impressions of him were, meant a lot. But I mentioned TCAF. When it comes to festivals and conventions and all that, and the fact that we can't travel anywhere, what's the show you kind of miss the most? I know you didn't get out all the time to cons, although I'd see you at MoCA periodically.
Yeah, I've been breaking out a lot more, branching out, or just getting out of my hole. I've been in a hermit mode since 2012 or so, in some ways. So I've been coming out a lot more. I always miss SPX and MoCA. I mean, those are my favorites. But, I think the one thing, let me just say a weird ranty logistic thing real fast, is like when 2021 rolls around, I'm going to have no idea what I've paid for already. Like, did I pay for a table for MoCA 2020? Did I pay for advertising there? I'm going to be getting bills and be like, didn't I already pay that? Did I? I don't know. I keep terrible records. So I'm really, next con season is going to be a bit of a drag because I'm going to have to get into all my I have to get my head into numbers mode. But I think SPX always has I have a soft spot because I've been with SPX since the beginning.
Yeah. What was your start in comics? I mean, I remember buying the mini of Hutcho and working hard back in, I was in grad school, so that had to be like 94?
That's about right.
95?
Yeah, 94. Yeah.
Where'd comics start for you?
Well, you don't want this to be too long of a podcast, so...
No, this is cool. This is a longer form one. This doesn't have to be like the daily ones, because we've never really spoken on mic before. So tell me where it started.
Well, it started with Peanuts then, when I was 7 years old. I mean, my earliest memories, I have very few early childhood memories, but a lot of them are drawing Peanuts, tracing Peanuts. I remember a zine, and I really wish I still had it. It was a little pamphlet I made for my second grade class, and it was just a sort of like, do you like Lucy? Why not? Here's Lucy, blah, blah, blah. Do you like Linus? But I realized upon reflection a long time later, pretty recently, that what I was responding to with Peanuts was the heightened emotion contained in boxes and little characters. And I think that was just my way of interpreting the emotional adult world around me, maybe my own emotional world, whatever. But utterly, I now know that's what I was drawn to. It's just like, oh, you can capture emotions, you can play with them, you can heighten them, you can extend them, you can add them like math, you can do all sorts of things. You can have characters. It's drama, but that's where I was getting my drama, was in these little boxes and the drawings. I just love the drawings. The simplification and the exaggeration.
And given that there wasn't a Saw when you were growing up or coming up, what was your education like when it came to comics, I guess? I know everything is virtually self-taught for so many cartoonists, but did you have a moment of understanding this is what you were doing and how things fit together?
Well, there were a bunch of moments. I mean, I was one of the kids. So I think in third grade, there was the Sid Hoff Art of Cartooning book. And in the school library, on the card, it was my name over and over and over and over and over again.
That was me with the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Oh, really?
In my local library.
Yeah.
Which luckily never panned out for me. So.
Yeah, that's funny. So that the Sid Hoff book, and then any book I could find, and they're all obscure. When I go back and I look at the books that formed me, they're books nobody's heard of. Like even the Sid Hoff book nobody really knows about, even though he was popular. But there's a Ken Muse book. Nobody really knows much about Ken Muse, but that book's pretty great. I went on eBay obviously and got all these when the internet happened. There's a book by I'm trying to remember his middle name, John Richardson. Isn't that his first and last name? The guy that was just written about guy who took over, not Tarzan, Prince Valiant maybe for a while. Anyway, he had a great cartooning book. So anyway, I just read all these cartooning books. But the thing is I never understood writing, and I never understood where ideas come from, and I never understood structure. So I never understood any of those things. So I just doodled. I was doodling basically until I went to SVA. And even in SVA, I was doodling. I only went there for 1 year. So I knew early on I wanted to be a cartoonist. When I heard there was a school you could learn cartooning in, SVA, and I heard Harvey Kurtzman was there, and I heard Art Spiegelman was there, even though he wasn't, and Will Eisner. I knew these people, and I knew these names. Somehow I would have known Will Eisner. I'm not even sure. This would have been late mid '80s. So, but I would have known. I was reading something telling me, yeah.
I'm sure in bookstores at that point, A Contract with God and things like that were out. So potentially you'd have seen him in the little graphic novel area in the science fiction part of the bookstore.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. What I did find at that age was Von Baudet's erotica. And boy, that blew my brains out. That was great. So yeah, I knew I wanted to go there. I went to SVA for 1 year. Almost immediately after being there, I was like, what am I doing here? It's hard to know where to start as to how inappropriate it was for me. First of all, year one is all fundamentals. So I'm there learning painting and drawing and photography and sculpture. And these are things I'm really grateful to have had some practice with now. But what I should have been learning is how to draw that emotional content and turn it into a story, and how to turn that into drawings, and that's not what I was doing. The people around me, so of course it's a college, so you see the older students and stuff, and the ones who are already in the program, they're already past the foundation year, and they're second year, third year. All they're doing is like drawing superheroes, fornicating. And it's so appalling to me. Then I'm like, and even in Will Eisner's class, like Will Eisner at the end of the year, he has this book that comes out. Like this is, I think it was called Gallery, Will Eisner's Gallery. Like just rotten stuff. And so I was like, I can't. And it was so expensive. And my mom is working 2 jobs to keep me there. And I'm like, this can't hold. So I just never went back. Did manage to sit in on one Harvey Kurtzman class once. And I was
going to ask, did you get to study under anybody?
Well, good? Yeah, I mean, Harvey was pretty ill at that time, and it was mostly Sarah Downs. And we did take one bus trip to Cartoon Art Museum when it was up in Connecticut, and that was pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really get to study with Harvey. I think I sat in on Will Eisner's class. We just sort of would muscle our way in sometimes and say, can we sit here for a couple hours?
Yeah.
So then I quit SVA, went back home to my parents, saved up some money, and moved to Seattle. At Seattle, everything started. So that would be like about around 1990. And I met, I'd already been pen pals. They still use that term? I don't know, but I'd already been pen pals with John Lewis.
The true swamp guy, not the congressman. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Jon. See, I always visualize the word when I say it in my brain. So of course it's John, Jon. I
know. I just figured there might be somebody listening.
Yeah, so yeah, that's so funny. forgot. And so there was the day I walked in, there was a budding comic scene there. John had met Dave Lasky. Dave Lasky knew Megan Kelso. Jason Lutz was already there, I think. Now I'm not even sure. So immediately just fell into this group of 5 or 6 people who all thought way too much about the kinds of comics they wanted to make. You know, it was like we were very, I don't want to say snooty, but we definitely thought about it a lot. We were kind of artsy fartsy about it, or maybe intellectual snooty about it. But anyway, so we fell into this like little clique, and we just every week we drew comics, we talked about the comics, we critiqued them. James Stern was a part of that. There was a bunch, and the Seattle. Oops, sorry about that. I guess that's my computer. The number of cartoonists in our sort of our age in Seattle started to grow. The number of cartoonists in the older generation was even growing at that time. You know, Fantagraphics, I can't remember how long they had settled there, but they had already been there. That's why we went there, to be near where the comics were coming out of. So Seattle, those 5 years was really just everything.
What was
everything for me?
That sort of bridge between your generation, like you mentioned, John, Megan, and that group, and that older set, like Bag and Woodring, who I guess was already there, and a few others. Was there much interaction at that point, or, you know, when you talk about the snootiness, was there also screw them, we're going to be the next wave?
No, not really. Well, there was a lot of interaction, and they were pretty friendly. I've always been far too shy for that kind of thing, and so I got
to start a podcast. It'll get you over everything. I'm just kidding.
I know people bang on your door to talk to you. Starting a podcast, like every once in a while, that sounds like an okay idea, and then I'm like,
no,
that is not. No. But
you're making a real contribution to the culture. I'm just doing this. It's okay.
Oh no, that's not true at all. But
I kid. But go on.
But no, Bag was really friendly. Jim Woodring were really friendly. But I was always too shy to really talk to them. We mixed it up at parties a lot, and that was kind of cool. I can't remember if we were invited to those parties or if we just crashed them, to be honest. But they were pretty welcoming, and you know, Roberta Gregory was there at the time, I mean, countless others would, you know, there was
it's a pretty amazing collection.
Yeah. There's, you know, and there's even in just that 5 years that for me personally, because it was such a raw time, and the time was so, it shifted so much that there are even little eons inside those 5 years. So, you know, when Pat Moriarty and R.L. Crabb and all those guys had this house, that was sort of like the second 2 years of the sort of 4 or 5 years I'm thinking of. And I think Eric Reynolds was in that house for a while. And, you know, some of us kept kind of separate just because our brains weren't wired certain ways. I think like we were really the literary types, right? We were trying to make, I guess, literary comics or something. And so we didn't have the underground behind us as much, you know, even though I adore Crumb and a lot of the undergrounds, we were all more like, how can this be more like the literature I read? How can this be more like,
I'm going to say
something, you know?
pretension without meaning it in a horrible sense. But that literary pretension or pretense that we had, that somehow there was a difference between that and, you know, these other cartoonists.
Well, that's an interesting word, because I actually went back and forth, maybe just one volley with Peter Bagg, I think via email, maybe early 2000s, because Pete really hates pretension. And
you think?
Yeah. And I saw a really nice quote, and again, I think this is like when email first hit or something, right? And I think I found a good quote from Brian Eno about the value of being pretentious and the value of trying to extend past your own boundaries and limits. And I remember sending that to Pete, and him saying, "Yeah, well, look who it's coming from." And I'm like, "All right, well, that's the end of that conversation."
Yeah, see.
So I think that's a good word to hang that on. It's like, so we had some pretensions, and I'll stand by that. And so, but there were other pockets in that community that didn't so much.
And I would keep in mind that Pete ended up making biographies with like 60 or 70 page appendices, you know, of notes following them. So it's not like he solely stuck to, the immediacy of a Buddy Bradley sort of thing too. He ended up finding new forms for himself, and one could say pretense of historicism and all that stuff. But, where did your literary? Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say no pretense in the drawing. He's still being Pete Bagg.
Oh yeah. He's still got those rubber bones and yeah. And where did your literary leanings come from, or background arise?
Oh, they mostly came from John Lewis, the cartoonist, not the congressman. John,
I haven't gotten to meet Lewis in my lobbying job by day. Although I did once have I haven't yet, but I did have one time where basically I was supposed to leave the house at like 4:30 in the morning, take a train down to DC for some lobbying and come back. And when I got up at 4, check my email, and the office I was going to meet said, Gil, we're so sorry, but like we're all down on our boss is down on the floor of Congress because John Lewis called a gun rights or a gun control sit-in. Is there any way you can come later in the day? Just email us. And I wrote back, when John Lewis calls for a sit-in, you sit in. Yeah. I'll see you in the afternoon. It's no big deal. I'll email you on the road when I'm coming down. And they got it hours later when they finally woke up. But that was my moment of, dude, it's John Lewis. Yeah. I'm not going to pull. No, I need to be down there. You guys
calls a sit-in. Oh my God, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the other John Lewis turned you on to.
Well, John was such a reader. John's brilliant and his mind is always firing anyway, but he also had, in his later teenage years, was homebound a lot. So he read constantly. He's one of the most creative people I've ever met, and was a huge mentor to me. He's a year younger than me, but he's a huge mentor to me in that way. So he'd say, you need to read this Italo Calvino book. You need to read this, this sci-fi book. You need to read all this stuff. So we would just read, and we'd be like, why aren't comics trying harder? And so we tried harder. I should mention, somehow I didn't mention Ed Brubaker yet, but Ed was also in town, and I think he's 2 years older than me or something, maybe 3, but he was a mentor in a lot of ways too, partially because he started off real young, also because he was very blustery and would tell you what he thought all the time. And so if you're hungry for feedback, you'll take it there. So Ed would say crazy stuff like, never draw a full moon. It looks like an orange, and you'd be like, all right, I'm going to
oracular pronouncement. Okay.
No, but Ed also had real, very specific literary tastes. I mean, when Ed wasn't drawing, he was usually reading crime fiction.
And yet somehow he went in the direction he went. I'm just again, it's good to find the things you love and actually be able to work in that sort of vein.
For sure. Yeah. No, he was studying. It was clear he was studying. Like you could see it in his eyes.
Now, do you wish you had a saw when you were coming up?
Oh yeah, totally. It's in the marketing materials. I actually say that I built the school I wish I'd gone to, for sure. And at the time, Seattle on this like ad hoc series of lunches and potlucks and meetings and stuff was the closest I could come, but there wasn't exactly that the teacher student training that I would have liked so much. I'm pretty hungry for maybe in a bad way, for structure and to be told what to do. So I probably would have taken well to that kind of thing for a tiny bit, for like a couple of years, the length of time it takes to be a decent student. I was a bad student.
But that's also the question of when would it have been the right time for you? Because we're not always ready when it's there for us.
Yeah. But yeah, so I built and I'm always thinking about that. I'm always trying to think about like the kinds of people who are going to, but part of my thinking is that I'm still stuck in the 20th century. I'm still stuck in thinking the school is for people with no, who haven't really been initiated in the culture. Yeah, exposed, right. Yeah. And of course that's totally changed now. And so what's more important now is more the community, the accountability. Yes, the wisdom of having done a lot of work and the understanding of creative practices and stuff, but less like, have you seen Mobius? Of course they've seen Mobius, you know.
Or, I mean, do they even get how socially stigmatizing it was to read comic books when we were kids?
God, I don't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's things like this. Like you said, we were getting shoved into lockers for reading the Avengers, not making it, the most popular thing ever on the planet Earth. Yeah. It's true, though. I mean, I'm happy that they have this now. I'm happy that it's got this broad acceptance. But good Lord, we were ridiculed for Doctor Who and all that, all these pop culture things.
Shoved into lockers. I actually have a slightly different experience with comic books proper.
Yeah.
For some reason, I never encountered them.
Didn't get shoved into lockers? Good.
Right. Well, no, I never read comics.
Okay.
I kept to my comic strips. I mean, even at age, 8, by that point I was cutting out like Broomhilda out of the newspaper and even Garfield and stuff. And so I kept to comic strips my entire, let's say, high school career or whatever. And Mad Magazine was a lifeline, but I never even saw, I don't know how, I never even saw a superhero comic until I was 17, I think. Maybe 16.
Congratulations.
I know. I'm really grateful for it. And I walked, and it's partially because a comic book store opened up in my town. And I walked right in past this wall of like reboots. I think Wonder Woman had just rebooted at that point. And I was like, oh, isn't it charming that they have all these old superheroes on the wall? And I went right to like where the sort of Teenage Mutant Ninja inspired black and white Boom stuff was. And that I just started devouring that stuff. I had no idea people still read superheroes. Utterly confounded. So I never had that. So I never really thrown into lockers for liking peanuts.
That's good then. I'll just keep my trauma to myself, I suppose. But,
no, it's okay. I mean, it's a good time to listen to each other.
Oh, sure. Well, when you talk about dealing, the different frame of reference with younger students, what's the biggest challenge in that respect? Is it simply that sense of you having to earn what they already know, or are there other just aspects of talking to someone half your age or younger about art and cartooning and storytelling?
Yeah, that that thing you said about having to earn. I'm not even sure what the end of that phrase was, but
well, we had to go hunt things down,
right,
and into stores, and we had to find someone who knew something. Now it's you type it again. If they don't know who Mobius is, they're going to type the name in on their phones while you're talking and look it up and
be
get
pretty fully versed in about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
right. And then they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I read Airtight Garage." I mean, I can't. Yeah. Well, I mean, so yeah, I'm not really sure, but definitely the cultural awareness is a sort of barrier that I don't really understand that well. Like, am I offering a service when I tell them what I think about something that they have some familiarity about? If I don't like the Airtight Garage and I tell them why, is that helping, hurting? Is it just wasting time? So there's a little bit of that, but there's also like I think so much of my artistic upbringing was like, hey, look at this new thing, right? A lot of that, and you just integrate that new thing because somebody you trusted said that. Look at this new thing. You read it and you integrated it into your into your creative system, and so that isn't extremely valuable anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the biggest obstacle is, but I do think, as corny as it sounds, being a patient and attentive reader of their work matters a lot. But then there's actually the main obstacle, and this has always been true since I've been teaching, which is about 20 years now. Like, if I can't read something, but their friend next to it, they say, "Oh, I get it." Like, we're talking two different languages already. Like, if I say this doesn't make sense, I can't read it, but the person next to him says, "Yeah, but I can get it." Like, we're not. I'm trying to explain to them that it takes difficulty to get, and all they want to do is and their friend is saying, well, yeah, it took me some difficulty, but I got it. So let's move on. What's the problem, right? Trying to communicate that there's a value to immediately reaching people with what you're trying to communicate, that gets sort of lost sometimes. You know what I mean? When you're trying to teach clarity and you say this isn't immediately clear, if anyone in the room can say, well, I get it, then they feel vindicated.
Yeah, I get you. Now, when did you feel capable of teaching, qualified to teach? I guess. And don't say I still don't, because that's going to undercut your whole workshop.
No, I wouldn't say that. There are things I should, there are pockets where I'm less valuable, but it's one of there's one I want to say there's one magical instance in my life I can point to, and that's that Tom Woodruff at SVA hired me. Like, I'm deeply grateful to him for doing that. I was prepared. As soon as I dropped out of SVA, this is totally true. As soon as I dropped out of SVA, I started compiling a list of things I would teach if I ever taught, because I would be like, this, maybe not as soon, maybe a couple of years, but like,
we'll pretend. Yeah, poetic license. That's one of the things you can teach.
But I just said this is literally true, and then I. But as I started to sort of learn on the go, I started to compile what I was learning. It's like, oh, that's how this works, right? Because there were people around me doing things effortlessly. I later realized that a lot of times they were high, and I didn't know that. But anyway, they would oh, I just drew this 16-page comic last night. I was like, wow, and it was good and beautiful, and so maybe they were high. Some of them were in New York, anyway. But anyway, so as I struggled through learning how to make comics, I just sort of paid attention. I kept notes. And so when I got this not exactly random call, but kind of random call from Tom, who was looking to replace Joe Sacco, I think, at SVA, because Joe had just won a Guggenheim, I think. And I'd already like thrown in a resume, and I do sort of mean thrown in. It felt like just like tossing it in. And I had a couple other people sort of speak up for me, Joey Cavalieri at DC especially, and Joe Sacco, that I got this call, and he was like, we've got this position. Do you want to come in and interview for it? Yeah. So when I got that call, I'd already had a folder of teaching ideas, like a literal folder on paper in a paper folder. Yeah. Sorry, I just have to keep commenting like that. And so I brought it with me, and I was like, yeah, this, I was ready. But the truth was, I wasn't really ready in the way SVA students needed. I wasn't exactly ready in the way Tom needed, but I felt I was ready. I learned quick. And actually the moment I got it would have been week 2 or 3. That's when I realized, like, oh, all this pre-planning for years, that's like totally wrong. I got to learn fast what it is they really need. That moment was when I was critiquing on the wall a bunch of students' work, and I was talking to this one guy, and I had to say, I just think when you put a body into a wood chipper, it's not going to fracture in that way. And I left that day. I was like, where am I? What is these are not in my notes, the notes I've been taking about like how to find deep ideas, whatever. So I had to, I had to sort of recalibrate and make lesson plans that were about like clarity and sort of idea generation at the same time, but also really focusing on like trying to relearn what I was never exceptionally good at, which is like, oh, what's our best camera angle? What's our best composition? What are some of our visual choices here? My visual choices prior to that have been flat on,
Yeah, I'm visualizing a bunch of your Hutch Owen work, for example, and I'm like, there's not a lot of variation of camera angle. Yeah.
No, so I had to, I had to learn a lot. So anyway.
And how much did that help you as a cartoonist?
Oh, it helped me I've been so grateful for this past, all this time being a teacher, because it's made me completely, it's made me work harder. It's made me curious. It's made me constantly curious, about how I can get better at the medium, because I'm always trying to transmit it back. So yeah, it's really it's been a wonderful gift for my own art, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Hutch Owen would be having a moment right now, or was his peak really the Occupy time?
I don't, you know,
is it something you ever think about as far as that first character love goes?
Maybe not, because I think it was only in 3 metropolitan areas. Yeah, I think he's a product of the grunge era. I don't think he's coming back. I don't think there's any reason for to even think what he would be.
Yeah,
you know, he wasn't always satire. He was more farce, I think. But yeah, there was some satire in him, and it's impossible to satirize things right now, and it has been for 15 years or something.
Yeah, especially this last bunch. I mean, this was I may have been one of the early people to insult Tom Tomorrow by asking him during 2016 before the election. Well, at least you've got lots of fun material, right? Yeah. Little did we know, he did not take that well, even at the time.
I'm still waiting for universal health care, which I had dinner with Tom Tomorrow once, and he insisted it was going to happen someday, because all the corporations were going to insist on it because they were all going bankrupt, and it hasn't happened. So I'm still mad at Tom Tomorrow.
Yeah,
no,
I'll let him know. We're still in touch.
Okay.
We talk regularly, but yeah, I think he's a little more sanguine at this point. But.
Yeah, no, that was a great dinner. We met. I did this tour with Jen Sorensen and Tim Kreider in 2000. God almighty, the Bush years. They were so horrible.
Yeah. And now we look back, not fondly.
No, not fondly at all. They were horrible. And
yeah.
And so we were all, I don't know if Jen is a political cartoonist by nature, but Tim and I aren't exactly. But we took it up. We took up the mantle because we were so outraged all the time.
Yeah.
And actually, Jen isn't necessarily political, I think, by nature. She's definitely a satirist by nature, though. And so we went on this book tour, 2006. It was an off year, and I can't remember. But we all had political books out, and we're trying to. No, it would have been 2000. Forget it. Anyway,
the Bush years.
Yeah. But we did this Northeast tour where we did live readings of our political stuff, and it was a great time. But that's when we got to meet Tom and have dinner with him, and I felt good. I was like, oh, he knows more about the world than I do. So if we're going to have national health care soon, that's cool.
Yeah, clearly, as an older figure, he must have authority. Yeah.
And I also managed to wrangle us onto Air America at the time.
Oh wow.
Onto Scott Cedar, what's his name? Sam Cedar and Janine Garofalo's show. And it was such a debacle. It was so great to be there. I mean, the only reason it was a debacle, well, first of all, they had to reschedule, and we were coming through New York on this day. They had to bump it up a week or something. So we had to reschedule everything. So that was part one of the debacle. Not a big deal. Things like that happened. But the real debacle was I see it now in retrospect. They're making entertainment. They're not even making entertainment. They're just making content for their audience.
They're filling a time slot.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we're just there to bounce off of for a little while. We thought we would be there to be interviewed a little, and so and I just have these images of Jen speaking in the microphone, just trying, I think 3 times she said, I actually made a cartoon about this. And then they just start talking over her, never did she manage to finish that sentence. It was so sad. But anyway, it was fun to be on. I don't know how we got on that topic.
Tom Tomorrow, presumably,
politics and
satire, farce, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But, do you have a place you want to go once you're in Florida, so you can go wherever you want anyway, because liberty and all that. But
where's this question going? I have no idea what you're about to ask.
Anywhere you want to post-pandemic. We talked about the cons and festivals you'd want to go to, but is there any sort of, once we're past this, I would sure love to go to X.
Well, the truth is I'm pretty easily adaptable, and I've managed to be happy in most of the places I've lived. But around 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, Leela started talking about getting out of Florida permanently. So I know you're probably asking about like a vacation,
or even
something.
then, do you have a plan that's been derailed?
Oh, we do. Yeah, I mean, 2016 just exposed way too many fissures, and we're trying to make our way back Northeast. We're planning for that to be the end of this year, but I don't think that's going to happen. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's not.
You could do it from a car, but
could do what?
You probably have live, but you probably have possessions and a child and everything. That
actually, the truth is I could easily be talked into living in a bus or a van. Like it would take but that's not going to happen. I
forget. Did your wife get stuck in Europe at one point during this, or am I misremembering?
No, it's accurate. She was in Switzerland, and it was just that time period where you're like, oh, this is kind of bad, but it'll be okay, to like, oh my God, I can't believe we let you go to Switzerland, right? It was like that time period between when she left and she came back. So right, early February or something, maybe,
no, March, once they did the travel ban and all that stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry. Of course. Yeah. No, the time is really messed up, right? But she was only stuck a day or two, and but then sort of self-quarantined in her room, in one room in the house for 2 weeks after that. And it was a pretty trying time, actually. But we're trying to get to the Northeast, and it's largely because I might have argued against it, but it's largely because the governance of the state is just criminal, and it's not going to get any better. And our people are up Northeast. So that's one reason we've been transitioning so much at SAW. We've been transitioning to online, and a blend of like online and sort of weekly workshops or week-long workshops. And that's one thing we've been working on since end of 2019. And so we're just sort of accelerating some of that. And I think we're in a good position to do that, so long as people, I think, if and when the pandemic ends, people are still thinking about art and have some money to devote to their practices and stuff like that. But when that happens, you'll probably find me up Northeast somewhere, probably flying down here a couple times a year, and teaching a lot online.
And do you find, and I know it's early, but are students' works reflecting what we're going through right now?
Nobody's working.
Or are they?
Nobody's.
I wasn't sure if any of them are making anything. Does it reflect? Yeah.
I even tried it early on. I had a bunch of prompts, and I even got a little more resistance than I expected. So I don't know, not at the moment. But that is one thing. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to like tell people who are suffering to like write and draw about that suffering right now.
Yeah.
Not sometimes, always. I mean, it's almost always. I remember one time I taught in a teen shelter in New York. They were like, hey, have somebody come in and do comics with them for a couple hours. They did not want to talk about what they were going through. They did not want to tell autobiographical stories. They wanted to invent superheroes. And so that's what we did. And I'm not very good at that, as we've explained. So, but that taught me really, really hard that's not, I'm such a realist, and I like those stories that are like about direct transmissions about one's suffering, but it's not where most people are at. And
it's weird though. It puts me in mind of two oddball things that weirdly connect. One was when Susan Sontag was in Kosovo, around all the troubles in the 90s, and decides that she's going to bring culture and art to the people by staging Beckett.
Beckett.
Yeah, see? And it's one of those like, no, I think they'd prefer like Bye Bye Birdie or just something to take their minds off of the existential nightmare they're living through, but you do you.
Yeah, that would have been
And then
me.
there was Yeah, we would think this is what they need. Then you realize, no, that they want the opposite of that. There was also an instance, there was an interview on Mark Maron's podcast. I forget who he was interviewing, but that the guest was in Africa doing comedy workshops. He was touring around and he meets some poor Black African kids, one of whom says he wants to be a comedian. And this guy thinks, oh, you mean like Chris Rock or Kevin Hart, and just totally Black framework. And the kid's like, no, like Mr. Bean. And yeah, same thing. It's like, no, he's not just doing this to visualize him. He's looking at something that's funny, that it doesn't matter if it's black or white. It's just hysterical. So yeah, that was this guy's Zen bullet to the head was, oh, okay, yeah, you're not inside your one little framework. You see things in a more universal way.
Oh my God, that's great.
Yeah. So I'm saying be more open about this stuff. But yeah, so I was wondering if kids are already starting to process what this is or what the experience of it has been like. But I could imagine it's also so raw and so uncertain, I guess, that, turning it into anything besides like gag panel, like our comedy gag panel comic friends might be a little better at this because you're making quick distillations of the moment. But narrative, yeah, I can imagine it needs time to ferment.
I don't know. I think a lot of people are posting online comics about the time. I haven't really been grazing through all that, but are you seeing it out there in the culture? I mean, I know that Desert Island just launched this Instagram where they're soliciting that kind of stuff. And have you looked at that?
My only exposure to the culture is doing this every day. Doing like 30 to 40 minutes. We're going long because it's technically our big episode. But yeah, it's all I get is what, the various people I interview for this stuff tell me about how they're seeing it. Even the teachers are like, yeah, a little bit early at this point, or they haven't figured out how they're processing it because they're still in that process, I guess, of just getting used to this situation, acclimatizing themselves to, I'm not going out, I'm not going anywhere. Writers and artists who I thought would have more meta, profound thoughts about all this stuff instead have talked about like their process for disinfecting their groceries when they get, seriously, it's things like that. I'm like, oh, you're not spending time thinking heavy, deep thoughts here. You're actually just, how do I logistically get this food in my house without potentially killing myself? So yeah, that can make art making tough, I suppose.
I've been thinking about that, but the fact is at least in my own work, that I've removed everything in the idea generation phase. I've removed everything that's not about death or absolute primal urges. So like that's kind of by design and kind of by accident. Like at the end, I realized like, oh, there's nothing but primal urges and death that can be discussed in this framework. And so when I think about the pandemic and what we're going through, I'm like, I'm already covering all this. It's like death has been the main subject for a couple of years for me, and I think the one thing that's coming out for me is the things that we are not able to do, especially in ways we're not allowed to touch each other. I think it's coming out in some of the things I've been sketching. So I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to look back on all this time, and actually, hopefully, people will collect it and archive it well.
That's all I'm doing with this whole project. So we'll see if anybody remembers afterwards. But it's not like I'm suffering by any means. So it's unfortunate that we had to do our first session this way. But when we're in the post-pandemic time, I am going to hold you to sitting down in person and talking literature and comics for real on mic. If you're,
I would love that. Yeah. I didn't even know we were going long today.
I kind of figured. I thought we've never really recorded, and it's always possible we're all going to die. So I'd like to just get this out of the way. So thanks for coming on, Tom. And
sure.
I'm hoping we've got a Mocha or an SPX sometime in the next year or so.
What do you think about SPX? That's probably not going to happen, right?
Oh no, it's going to be canceled.
What about
I don't know.
Yeah, they'll be canceled too.
They'll be canceled. I think, I don't know anything, but based on my own conference hosting experience, there are things you can't announce they're being canceled because you have insurance and commitments with hotels and all that stuff. So you have to pretend it's going to happen through X deadline, and then you can cancel. Yeah, there's all sorts of hotel contracts and venues and things like that. So I believe that Warren already knows SPX isn't going to happen, but he can't say it's not going to happen.
Interesting. So. It's like when you find out how car dealerships work, how complicated those weird systems are. Yeah. You realize. Oh.
Well, as everybody else is now discovering, the drug manufacturing process and all of those inputs are a lot more difficult than anybody thought, which is the shit I've been marinating in for 21 years now for my day job. There are instances of, all these things I never thought of because they weren't part of my day-to-day life. Yeah, it's a complicated world, man. You know?
I kept trying to say that. One last anecdote, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I don't care if it's on mic or off or whatever, but my real good friend, Brendan Burford. Do you know Brendan?
Yeah, we met at Tom's memorial in December. We've stayed in. Tom apparently had been telling him for years, you have to reach out to Gil. You guys got to do a podcast and all that. And we met then and had a really nice conversation. So.
Yeah, you guys would definitely hit it off. You'd love that. But I remember I'd been when I was doing Hachoen, I was doing it it had a lot of different formats, but I did it as a daily strip for 2 years, I think, maybe 2.5 or something. And that whole time I'm pestering Brendan, who's the editor-in-chief of King Features, Popeye and Crazy Cat, all the good stuff. And I'm like, Brendan, you should run this. This is good. It's like, and he's always giving me this thing, like, you don't understand how it's just too complicated. It's more complicated. I can't just like flip a switch. And like, he really, he loved the strip. And, but then like, it was like a week later, he was complaining about something Obama was doing. I'm like, man, you just gave me a whole thing about how you can't flip a switch and run my comic strip. And you want him to flip a switch and, and stop the Afghanistan war or something. And, it's like, I was like, yeah. Brendan. He was like, yeah, but it's not the same. I don't know.
It's different, Mine's just a comic strip. After all, he's got the,
Well, you would think that's a switch. Like, okay, sign on the dotted line.
Whatever is not our area of focus, we assume is frictionless and works absolutely smoothly. And then you discover, oh no, everything is
totally. Oh my God.
Anyway, thanks for coming on. And, we'll at least at a minimum share book recommendations, and someday I'll tell you my Harold Bloom story when we're
you have one Harold Bloom story or many?
I have multiple now. I have the Harold Bloom in person story, and I've got the Harold Bloom memorial from last January.
Oh, wow. So I have one quick trivia, not trivia question, but let's say trivial thing I'd like to ask. Word is he read incredibly fast. Like you could read half a book during lunch. I've read stats. I think I read it on Christopher Lydon's website that he could, plow through a novel during lunch or something. And did you ever see that happen?
No, not.
I went looking online. I was like, I got to find a picture of Harold Bloom reading or a video, and never found it.
The only picture we have of that is him looking at pages of Masterpiece Comics by Bob Sikoriak,
which really?
I brought that up to. Well, okay. My extra Harold Bloom anecdote. When I knew I was going to record with Bloom, I was, let's see, it must have been around the time that Bob and Criota hosted a party in New York. So I told, I'd already announced it on Instagram, Twitter, or whatever, and Bob was just like, "Oh my God, if you're gonna get together with Bloom, can you please give him a copy of Masterpiece Comics? I just want to know that he's." And I was like, "Fuck yeah, dude! But you have to inscribe it and draw in it right now." And it must have been at his place, so he does that, and I bring that up to Bloom. He completely does not understand what he's looking at. He doesn't get why it's comics that are pastiche of old comics that are. His wife, on the other hand, Jean, she opens. She goes, oh, I get it. It's Dagwood, but it's Milton. Oh, and she's, she totally grokked it instantly. But I've got this picture. Like Bloom is just going through page after page, and I'm surreptitiously holding up my phone, taking shot after shot because I just need to get to Bob an image that Harold Bloom is actually reading his comics. So,
oh my God!
Yeah. So
is that public somewhere? Can I find that?
If it's not up online, then I'll zap you a picture because I've got a archive of some of that stuff. So.
Okay.
Anyway, Tom, this has been
a blast. I hope you have a great day, week.
Yeah.
Pandemic, everything.
Stay sane.
Yeah.
Great pandemic, man. Stay safe. Stay relatively sane, and I hope the students, make good comics.
Make it through. Yeah, and make good comics. Maybe now I'm focusing on making it through.
Yeah, the comics are more important than survival.
That's what I try to tell them. It doesn't go over well. All right, Gil, thank you so much. This was a blast.
And that was Tom Hart. Go to tomhart.net to learn more about his work, both his comics and the Sequential Arts Workshop. Sequential Artists Workshop, sorry. That's TOMHART. He's also on Twitter and Instagram as Hutch Owen, which is HUTCHOWEN. Although if you go to either place and search for Tom Hart, you'll find him. And all of his social media links are available at tomhart.net. He's also posting new installments of his work in progress at Instagram as B is Dying, which is the letter B _is_dying. It is a weird work. But I can't wait to see what Tom does with it in a longer form. Now, Sequential Artists Workshop website is learn.sawcomics.org. And that's got plenty of info about the program, its online components, its in-person options, which are obviously on hold for now, and more. If you're interested in learning more about comic storytelling, go there, check out the online options. It looks like a blast. And frankly, I've talked to other cartoonists about whether they would have wanted cartooning school when they were young, and there have been mixed answers about that. But I was so happy to hear Tom describe Saw as the education he wishes he had when he was coming up as a cartoonist. So, I think it's in good hands. Now, in addition to his book-length version of B is Dying, Tom is also co-editing the RMP Field Guide to Graphic Literature, Artists and Writers on Creating Graphic Narratives, Poetry, Comics, and Literary Collage. And that'll be out next year from Rose Metal Press. His most recent book, as I mentioned, is The Art of the Graphic Memoir, Tell Your Story, Change Your Life, which includes excerpts from various pieces of graphic memoir by great artists over the years, including some past guests like Harold Tyler. Now, in the before time, I always recorded these shows in person, but I'm now using Zencastr.com to record remotely. If you're interested in learning more about that, go to Zencastr, which is ZENCASTR, so no final E. There's a free hobby level as well as a pro level that costs $20 a month. That's what I use so I can get higher level audio quality from the final sessions. My Patreon supporters more than cover this expense, especially since I'm not spending money anymore on parking and tolls and subway trips and coffee and all this stuff for those in-person episodes I used to do. So what I'm saying is I used to end these shows with a big pitch for my own Patreon and PayPal. I'm not doing that this time. I'm asking you to donate to other people. Give to the artists and writers you like Tom, who has his own Patreon. Show them some support. You can go to Patreon, Kickstarter, GoFundMe, Indiegogo, tip jars, whatever. There are a lot of people out there who need help right now. And if you're not comfortable giving directly to artists or writers or other people in need, give to charities. Give to your local food bank. Go to the places that will help people. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You should visit my archives to check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and learn more about his art and painting. And you can listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.